I'd like to call to order this February 15th meeting of the Monroe County Plan Commission to order. Mr. Wilson, would you be so kind as to call the roll?
I sure will. Margaret Clemens.
Here.
Ray Randolph.
Here. Larry,
Bernie Garrett.
since this is your last one, I'm going to expect you to do Tron and Wright Randolph correctly one time.
Okay, Tron and Wright Randolph. Is that right?
That is so perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. It's just the distortion through the Zoom. Bernie Garritas.
I'm here, sir.
Bernie Garratis.
Hey, baby, I've heard it all. I am here.
I bet you have. I bet you have.
Jeff McKim.
Here.
Dee Owens.
Sorry, I think Dee just entered. Let me go ahead and promote her as a, okay, she's on.
So Dee.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. Jerry Pittsford. Don't see him yet. Jim Steenbrook. Saw him. Julie Thomas. Amy Thompson.
Here.
Okay, we have 7 members and a quorum.
Okay. Would you be so kind as to introduce the evidence then?
Yes, I request that the following items be introduced as evidence for tonight's meeting. The Monroe County Comprehensive Plan is adopted and amended. Monroe County Zoning Ordinance is adopted and amended. The Monroe County Subdivision Ordinance is adopted and amended. The rules of procedure of the Monroe County Plan Commission, and the case is advertised and docketed for hearing on tonight's agenda.
Move we adopt the evidence as read.
Second.
Okay, I'll call the roll in adoption of the evidence. Tron and Wright Randolph.
Yes.
Bernie Garritas.
Yes.
Jeff McKim.
Yes.
Dee Owens.
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook.
Yes.
Amy Thompson.
Yes.
Barb Clemens.
Yes.
Motion to approve the evidence is approved by a 7-0 vote.
And have there been any changes to the agenda, or could there be a motion to approve that?
Move we approve the agenda as published.
And
Second.
let the record reflect that Commissioner Thomas has arrived. And so would you be so kind to call the roll again?
I will note the arrival of Julie Thomas on the roll for tonight's meeting. Okay, I will now call the roll in regard to the approval of the agenda as published and advertised. Again, a motion in favor is a motion to approve the agenda. Bernie Garritas.
I think he's muted.
Bernie, you okay, Bernie?
Yeah, I'm okay. Yes.
Okay. Jeff McKim,
Yes.
Dee Owens,
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook,
Yes.
Julie Thomas,
Yes.
Amy Thompson,
Yes.
Barb Clemens,
Yes.
Tron and Wright Randolph.
Yes.
Okay, the agenda is approved by 8-0 vote.
Okay, well, the next item on our agenda then is the approval of the minutes, and we have 3 separate submissions. So I'll leave it up to a member of the Plan Commission if you'd like to review them for approval separately or together.
I move together.
I see Dee Owens' hand is raised. I'd like to recognize her.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, I did go through the minutes. I noted that the September 7th minutes up until page 48 or 49, I believe, they were not complete at the end of the minutes. So in the event that we decide to approve them together, we should probably skip that one until it's completed.
Mr. Garritas, would you like to amend your motion?
Yeah, nice job, Dee.
And is there a second then? I think the motion then that Mr. Garritas has agreed to be amended is that he's moved approval of the August 17th and the September 21st meetings, the minutes to those meetings. Is that correct, Mr. Garatas?
I'll accept that.
Okay, is there a second?
I second that, Bernie.
Oh,
Okay, Mr.
I will call the roll. The vote is to approve the minutes from the August 17th, 2021 regular meeting of the Plan Commission, the September 21st, 2021 regular meeting of the Plan Commission. In favor is a vote to approve both sets of minutes. Jeff McKim,
Yes.
Dee Owens,
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford is not here yet. Jim Steenberg,
Yes.
Julie Thomas,
Yes.
Amy Thompson,
Yes.
Art Clemens,
Yes,
Tron and Wright Randolph,
yes.
Bernie Garatas.
Yes.
The minutes for both meetings are approved by an 8-0 vote.
okay, and we'll wait for the completion of the September 7th, 2021 minutes, at a future meeting, possibly the next one. Okay, we have no administrative business tonight, and we have unfinished business. The first item is REZ-22-1, Bedford Recycling Rezone from ME to HI. This is the final hearing concerning 130.45 plus or minus acre parcel in section 32 of Perry Township at 405 West Dillman Road. And I think Jackie is the planner on this. If you would be so kind as to go over it with us, we'd be grateful.
Sure, Margaret. And I'll also note just at the end, if we have time for some reports, it wasn't administrative business, but just some announcements at the end. I'd like to take some
Okay.
time.
Sure.
Okay. So as you mentioned, the location of this rezone petition is 405 West Dillman Road. It is in Perry Township. The location and the parcel is fronting South Dillman Lane and West Dillman Road. And it does contain some floodplain as well as it's a prior site for old limestone slabs to be put there, but it's not actually steep slopes, it's man-made. So this is the site on the right, some site conditions. The current zoning of this parcel is mineral extraction. The petition is a request to be heavy industrial. So around this site, you have the wastewater treatment plant. There's a stone cutting business, Republic Services, and a few other sites around that are zoned either heavy industrial, light industrial, or mineral extraction as well. And then the comprehensive plan has this area as farm and forest. There is some heavy industrial in the county, about 14 parcels. When I checked about 2 weeks ago, there are 14 parcels in the county zoned heavy industrial. So the petitioner is interested, or the owner of Bedford Recycling is interested in placing a scrap metal processing facility at this location. That new use has not yet gone through the commissioners yet. It will go next Wednesday. And if approved, they would pursue that as a new use. But as of right now, they're seeking a rezone to the heavy industrial zone, which is the only zoning district that will permit that new use if approved by the county commissioners. On the screen here is a list of the permitted uses in the heavy industrial zone. There are several, as I mentioned, very few zones in the county are zoned heavy industrial, but this site is surrounded by other industrial sites. And so as you'll see, staff has recommended a positive or favorable recommendation of this rezone. And here's a continuation of those uses. So I do want to take a second to look at the packet as well, because there were some question and answers by the Plan Commission at the last meeting. And we did add a few more questions and answers and revised a few questions and answers. And I hope they get a chance to go through these. I will go through just questions 1, 2, and 3, since these are fairly helpful and pick up where we left off the last time. So we had asked the petitioner if they would be interested or willing to put together a decommission plan. And they have put together a letter under Exhibit 4. And staff did go ahead and take a look at what decommission plans are typically submitted and what they are usually submitted for. And we found a few that were in place for things like nuclear power plants. But we did find there was a closure plan at the EPA site that was more to deal with hazardous waste disposal. And we thought that might be a little bit more in line with what we're talking about here, since this is scrap metal recycling. So that's something that the petitioner has put together in Exhibit 4 and is able to speak to that, I believe. And then would you be willing to commit to an open space limitation for the property? So in speaking with the owner of Bedford Recycling, they had mentioned that the scrap metal recycling would not expand to the rest of the property. When we had emailed back and forth to discuss kind of an open space limitation, they did mention that they would be interested in the future of a future business not related to the scrap metal recycling, but maybe another business, sort of a manufacturing business, to be located on that site, potentially by subdividing if permitted, or some other possible way of adding. They said they wanted to add business and add more jobs to the county on this site, so that they wanted to keep the HI threshold of 20% open space, and they were not interested in going higher with that open space. And then number 3 was how will the petitioner deal with materials that enter the site that are not permitted under the scrap metal processing facility text amendments, such as manufactured homes and vehicles. So when we had discussed, Mr. Parsons, the owner, had mentioned that manufactured homes and vehicles would not be accepted past the gate, and any trash would be transferred to Republic Services, which is next door. And if there was something to escalate, such as someone trying to leave their vehicle at the site, they said that they would be able to call the police and have the car removed. So that was something that we wanted to discuss as kind of an update from last time. And then also we added a condition of approval or a condition of favorable recommendation, and that is to submit that statement for a closure plan in case the site were to close at some point. And I also will note that some plan commission members were able to visit the Bedford recycling site. So hopefully that was helpful. And I'll be able to take any questions that you have on this.
And Ms. Owens?
Well, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, I was one of the people who went down with Ann and Tron, and we took a whirlwind 2-hour tour of the facilities there. Mr. Patton's very proud of his work and his facilities, and was more than happy to show us there was even more, but we finally had to get going. Having said that, this particular station is more like a transfer station, is my understanding. And that just means that items that they need to bring in to come to the Bedford facility can be prepped first, so that when they get to the Bedford facility, they can go directly into the big machine. And if anybody can correct me, by the way, if I get this wrong, but this is my understanding of it. And they have run out of space where they're at there to be able to get enough stuff to go through the machines. And so by having a transfer station right on top of the highway, the vehicles and such can go there and be quickly processed to our satisfaction, so that when they get to Bedford, they don't have to go through that. They can go directly into the machine. It sounds sensible to me. And this particular property, I think, having looked at it, looks to me to be a decent property. So that's kind of my summation of it. And I'd be happy to hear Ann or Tron as well.
Okay. I just wanted to make a note that I think Drew was trying to be promoted to a panelist. He's there as a participant. I don't know if he's been added yet or not. But if there are other members of the Plan Commission or planning staff who'd like to comment following Ms. Owens' comments, please raise your hand.
I'll just say thanks for accommodating us. And then, you know, I've always said that I'll make myself available. And I'm very happy that they were able to make themselves available and give us a tour of the site. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas.
Yes, thanks. I appreciate that some folks were able to go to the site in Bedford. That's helpful, and I appreciate the report. I just would like some clarity, because between item 3 in the question and answer and item 13 in the question and answer, there's a bit of a contradiction, because item 3, question 3 says no vehicles and item 13 says vehicles. And also it looks like there's still an issue relating to getting an IDEM report. I want to make sure that that was still true, whether there have been IDEM reports reviewed, and also Tron and Wright Randolph raised the issue of a drainage board review before this is rezoned, and I wanted to hear about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Owens?
Yeah, thank you. I noticed that discrepancy as well. When we get to whomever later on, including Mr. Patton, I think I'm right in that they mainly are going to deal with autos there. And I was going to point that out once the discussion came along, that doesn't seem to be what's there. Again, it's more than a recycling place. It's a transfer station where just things are prepped to go further down the highway. Although that could change in the future, I suppose. So that was my take on it.
Margaret, I'd be happy to address some of Commissioner Thomas's questions if you'd like.
Yes, please, Jackie.
Okay, so to start out with the vehicles, Mr. Parsons does have an interest in collecting vehicles and was showing some images of some equipment that's used to sort of appropriately drain vehicles. And so they would be stored on concrete, and then those would actually be transferred as without much modification to the Bedford site. Well, when we met with Mr. Parsons, this was after the text amendment had gone through. We had originally discussed with the owner about the site and what they would be doing at the site, and vehicles were not a big ticket item. But I think since that vehicles have become a larger interest of the business in the Bloomington site. So we did communicate on several occasions that, you know, this text amendment does not allow for vehicles. It would require that the text amendment go back through the process, and it would have to be appropriately voted to allow for vehicles. And that's why we wanted to make it clear that they are interested in vehicles, but we would not be permitting vehicles. And so number 3 above is sort of how they're going to address not accepting vehicles if, you know, the text amendment doesn't say it can. And then the IDEM reports, we did talk to, or I did leave a message with the appropriate IDEM person and have not received something back to my knowledge. And I can double check that. They may have left me a voicemail, but I was waiting for an email, but I don't think that they've gotten back to me with any report. But like I said, I will double check that. And then drainage board, this has not gone to the drainage board. I know Tron had mentioned that, and I believe Kelsey Thatonia is on the line, but typically with rezones, they go through a full site plan review once the rezone has been approved and there's a drainage report associated. Andy Knust is with the RCJ and working with the owner on this site to do a full topographic study, as well as doing a few other IDEM required studies. So I don't believe that they're at the point where they have that drainage report completely ready, but it could be something that they may be able to send preliminary information to the drainage board if that might be helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Jelen. Mr. Enright Randolph?
Yes, I just kind of want to bring some more context to kind of the discussion about having this go to drainage board prior to the rezone. I don't like to necessarily be subjective to petitions, one at a time. This is kind of a unique situation with adding the additional use and everything just recently. But with further discussion with Ms. Petitioner, and there's no concrete, plan moving forward quite yet, but just my thoughts of having it go to the drainage board would be more of an encompassing thing to a lot of different high intense rezones. I feel like the drainage board could look at some of these rezones depending on the intensity being asked, and we get kind of a preliminary recommendation from the drainage board. I feel like it could add a lot of benefit due to what kind of rezones being requested. And I think we could maybe create a mechanism of the intensity that rezone might have. And if those should trigger a drainage board review, because, some of that use and the intensity of that use may not be appropriate. And from a drainage board standpoint, and I'd like to hear their recommendations. So just wanted to bring a little more to that discussion.
Since Mr. Enright Randolph, that you brought that up, I would like to acknowledge Ms. Petitioner and ask her what she needs from us before it goes to the drainage board. Kelsey, if you're there, could you let us know what you need from us at this time? Thank you, Kelsey.
Hi, thank you. This is Kelsey. So prior to going to the drainage board, I typically wait for that preliminary drainage plan, like Jackie mentioned. But if the plan commission would like the drainage board to review a rezone, I'm happy to bring it to them with the general plan that is presented and any information we have with the rezone. I haven't had to do this before, but we do meet on the first Wednesday of every month. I think in general, with my conversation with Tron, I think being involved with the comprehensive planning process is a great time to bring up some of these concerns. So if a parcel has certain environmental restrictions or just in general concerns, I would love to bring that up when we look at the more general plans that we have. So with something like this, I will kind of look at the rezone, anything higher intensity industrial, as Sean said, I'm going to be looking at it very closely, no matter what. I look at applicability for different types of environmental permitting, things that I don't even regulate, such as industrial stormwater permitting, air permits, things like that. I'll bring it to the appropriate personnel at the state. I also require a post-construction stormwater pollution prevention plan, which outlines all of the potential pollutants on this site. We require a operations and maintenance manual recorded with the deed. So we can enforce that. So if there are issues with any type of stormwater management facilities or anything on the site, my program does have the ability to watch those very closely and enforce it if necessary. So I just wanted to assure you that these are the things that my program can require, and I will definitely look at any high intensity or heavy industrial zoning very closely. So
Thank you so much, Ms. Petitioner. Thank you. And Mr. Stainbrook and then Mr. Garitas.
I'd like to register concern with the vehicle issue.
Thank you, Mr. Stainbrook. Mr. Garitas?
Yeah, just some insight on the drainage board review. And I think Tron's he's got a beat on a good concept. The thing I see that kind of contradicts that is we've got a very relevant and prepared and educated staff with the planning department, Kelsey, highway department. It's a pretty robust group knowledge wise. And I think things like critical watersheds, karst features, creeks nearby, things that we need to be aware of are important, and they certainly look at those. But as was mentioned, we don't want a situation where a petitioner feels like they've got to overcommit or put something on paper that they may not fully understand because a full site plan has not been developed yet. And at the rezone stage, we're not at that point. So, I certainly give deference to what Tron is saying, and that's certainly right along his mindset. I mean, and I respect that, but I don't know that we want to get to the fact that we've got to have the drainage board looking at something that maybe staff and our qualified people within the county can look at in preparation of a site plan, drainage plan. And I wouldn't want to see every rezone petition or even every heavy industrial position go before the drainage board before they go to the plan commissioner, commissioners, because I think that we could put ourselves and the petitioners in a position where they're presenting conflicting information because it's a chicken and the egg thing. So just observations. The other question I've got, so if we do work for any motion, either a motion to deny or approve, or favorable recommendation to the Executive Board of County Commissioners, would we need to put in there that subject to the scrap metal processing facility being a permitted use within the zoning ordinance, since that's going to be done next Wednesday? Is that appropriate, Larry or Jackie?
So this is a rezone just generally to the heavy industrial zone, even if the text amendment is not passed. Bernie, just to clarify, are you saying that this would only be rezoned if the text amendment passed?
I guess I'm asking that question. I mean, it's a pretty site-specific request that was something that's not in our ordinance. I think since the commissioners ultimately approved both of them, the language could be sorted out. I'm just kind of curious if that use, if any recommendation, because we could do a negative recommendation, we could still put a condition on it because the commissioners take it from there. Or if we do a positive recommendation, a motion may include that use. And maybe I'm overthinking it or underthinking it, I don't know, but the commissioners ultimately have the final say, so it may be irrelevant.
Mr. McKim?
I guess my thought on that is that the text amendment and the rezone can each stand independently, that the rezone can be voted on, and that's just to rezone from mineral extraction to heavy industrial. And then what's permitted in heavy industrial will depend on whether or not the Board of Commissioners approve the text amendment, and maybe later modify that text amendment. But I guess I kind of feel like they can stand alone as independent votes.
I can follow that. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the members of the Plan Commission for staff or for the general goodwill? If not, we'll recognize the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, and you have 15 minutes combined to speak to us about your proposal. So if the petitioner is here or the petitioner's representative, we'd like to hear from you. If you would raise your hand or press *9 on the cell phone if you're calling in.
I do see one of the attorneys. I just want to quickly ask Dave Schilling, are you there? Because you are more familiar with each of the attorneys' names.
Patrick Ziepolt is the attorney for Bedford.
Okay, and I see Mark Cranley with his hand raised.
Mark is the attorney for Republic Services.
Okay, so maybe that would be a better spot to talk about not the petitioner representative. Okay, and then another number. Okay, I'll see if this. There is a phone number ending in 9710. and they will have to press *9 to unmute.
*6 is to
Star
unmute.
six.
*9
Thank you.
is to raise your hand.
Okay, thank you, Margaret.
Yes.
*6. They are permitted to unmute.
And one attendee Mark Crandley has his hand raised.
I think Mark might be under the, one of the questions of the petition.
I see.
Okay, I'm not able to unmute the 9710. They will have to press *6 to unmute if they still wish to speak.
Okay, I think you can hear me now.
Yes, we
Yes.
can, sir.
Okay, this is Larry Parsons. And did you want me to go ahead and speak at this point?
Yes, sir. You have 15 minutes to talk with us about your request.
Okay. As Dee mentioned, this is basically to be where we just buy materials from the general public, and then we're going to transfer them to Bedford, to our Bedford operation, which has much more processing equipment. And that's where we'd like to process all the items that we get ferrous-wise in the Bloomington location. And all the non-ferrous business would be handled inside of a building. And as you have discussed cars here, and we understand the way that the text is currently written, we cannot buy automobiles at that site, and we can't process them. And we would hope, and we have talked to Jackie earlier on in prior meetings, that our hope is that down the road, because economically it would be a great benefit to us to be able to buy the additional tonnage in automobiles to bring them into our location, and then we would drain them in a manufactured piece of equipment just for draining automobiles, and then we would transport those to Bedford. And currently in Bloomington, and we mentioned JB Salvage to the extent that they do basically a lot of just what we would be doing. They're buying materials, they're not doing a lot of processing to them, and they're transferring the material on to people like us, like our Bedford facility, to process the metal. The difference that would be between us and them, currently the way that you're going to approve us is, number one, we can't buy automobiles. Number one, two, we couldn't store automobiles and harvest parts off of them. And three, we wouldn't be crushing any automobiles on site or doing anything like that, because the automobile, if we get down the road and we can buy automobiles, we would bring them on site, and it takes about 15 minutes to drain the fluids out of them. And then we would transport those vehicles to Bedford to get processed. And we think it basically, we're going to be offering you a facility in a much better location than, say, Bloomington Salvage in downtown Bloomington, or JB Salvage in the residential area that they're in. And our location will be a location that's built from the ground up with all of the proper surveying engineering done to handle all the drainage, all the effluent flowing off of our property. And it won't be something that's been piecemealed together as JB has grown over the years. And it's hard to have a comprehensive plan when you piecemeal something together. So what we're offering is a site on a large acreage for, if you compare it to the other two sites in town that you currently have, we have 31 acres with buffer zone around us, industrial around us, and it will be a new facility with all the drainage plan. And we understand, just as Tron was asking about, with the controls that you have and the state has, even if I wanted to not do the proper thing, I wouldn't be allowed to do something that's improper, because you're going to be approving all of the drawings that we would do on this site. And I think that we're going to be a benefit to the community, because we have a convenient place for people to get to take the scrap metal to, well, without having to go through downtown Bloomington. or to the JV site. And I'm welcome to take any questions that you might have. And we won't be buying any hazardous materials on the site. I mean, we won't accept them. And we don't have any issues. And when you asked about the environmental with IDEM, I think the last visit that we had from IDEM was probably in 2017. And the report that we've gotten back from IDEM, they typically come from someone who gets upset with you. They call IDEM on you. IDEM comes down, inspects, and says no violations. And that's basically what we have at the Bedford site. So I don't think that you'll find any, I'm sure that you won't find any smoking guns with IDEM at this point. So I'm open for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Do any members of the Plan Commission have questions for Mr. Parsons? Okay, well, then we move on to the public. And if there are members of the public who would like to speak in support of this petition, you would have 3 minutes, but if you would kindly raise your hand or press *9 on your telephone to let us know you would like to speak. So let's see. There's still one person who is an attendee, Mr. Mark.
Yes, ma'am. It's Mark Crandley.
Yes, Mr. Crandley, you have 3 minutes. How are you tonight?
Thank you. I should point out, you said you were looking for people speaking for. I want to make sure this is the public section, because I am not for this proposal. I am speaking against it.
Since you're recognized, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. I just want to make sure the record was clear. I represent Republic Services of Indiana, which owns adjacent property to this proposed solid waste site. And make no mistake, as I'll discuss here in a minute, this is a solid waste transfer site, that it violates your county ordinance 360. There's several reasons why this should be denied, and unfavorable recommendations. That I think the obvious one that was raised when this first came up in the work session was that this is spot zoning. I'm surprised that hasn't been discussed yet tonight, but this is taking the established rules and procedures, and I think of all the counties in Indiana, Monroe County has one of the most sensitive and thought through zoning process and zoning that. And we're throwing it out the window just because one particular owner wants a heavy industrial classification. And I would ask the commission to think of the unknowns that we have here. We don't know the limits of the metals that are coming to the site. We don't know the types of metals they plan on dumping here. We don't know how long it's going to be there. We don't know how they're planning to keep metals out of drinking water. You can imagine the problem that is. There are people that live within a mile of this property, within 1,700 feet of this property. How are they going to be protected from this? It's surrounded by 3 sides on agriculture, which we know from the comprehensive plan is a purpose of the comprehensive plan to support agriculture. We've talked about this, and I don't want to belabor the idea that at some point in the future, they're coming back to you, asking you to allow them to do recycling and stripping of cars and motorhomes. Think about the fluid. So this is just the first step towards that. But even putting those aside, the types of solid waste that's coming on the site are talking about appliances, air conditioning units, batteries, containers, oil barrels, paint cans, anything that has metal in it, they can bring on the site and leave it there for however long they like. You asked, and I think very wisely, some of us are old enough to remember the Westinghouse situation. We talk about remediation sites. I think very wisely asked, what happens if you go out of business and we're stuck with this junk that contains these dangerous metals? Their answer was, go pound sand. I'm not required to give that under state or federal law, so I don't have to give it to you. We hope we're not going to go out of business. I'm sorry, I forget the owner's name. It's been a long day. It gave you a letter that basically said, we don't expect to go out of business and we don't have arrangements if we do, but maybe we'll be able to sell this. This is junk. This is stuff people are coming to drop off at a junkyard. And their plan for decommissioning it is, we'll sell it at some point later in the future. That's not reasonable. It's not even a credible response to it. They're very appropriate. There's a commercial septic system proposed for the site. How is that going to affect the nearby landowners, in particular the water treatment center that is directly north of this proposed site? How is that going to be protected? We don't know about the drainage. We have several things you've asked for that you simply haven't been provided by this owner. One is the karst study. We're told the karst study came up positive for them, that there was no karst. Has that been provided to this commission? No, it has not. You've asked for information from IDEM. We're told just take the owner's word, and he tells you there hasn't been any issues with it. Well, there have been issues with the site because they've had people complaining, as they just admitted. There was a fire at that site just last April that took hours upon hours to put out. In the coverage, media coverage in Bedford of that fire, the police chief said this was an extreme example, but we have fires here all the time, was his word. And our understanding is that fire burned so bad, the ground was so saturated with chemicals that the ground was on fire. But you haven't been provided any information about IDEM. You asked about the wetland feature of the site. There's no delineation of a wetland. There has been no work to find whether or not there's a wetland. And I think what's really important, in particular, and I really appreciate the dialogue that went back and forth about the linkage between their request for a rezone and the rewording of the zoning statute to include a recycling facility. As it stands now, they are going to, if this process goes through and you give a favorable recommendation and the commissioners approve, they're going to have free hand to operate as a heavy industrial site in this district, and to do anything under heavy industrial site allowed. They're going from one of the most restricted areas for mineral extraction, which has very few things you can do on the site, to the most wide-ranging zoning classification in the county zoning code. And think about the things that entails doing. They could turn around and sell this property after the rezone and sell it as a heavy industrial site to anyone who wants to come in.
Thank you.
Finally, I want to make one final point. I know I'm running up against my 3 minutes. I know you have a robust agenda to deal with, but I want to make one point that should be very clear in the record related to Republic specifically, which is that we have a 20-year contract to handle solid waste for the county through the Monroe County Solid Waste District. This impinges on that contract and triggers the termination clause for that. That is a bad thing for the people of the county. That should absolutely be considered a matter of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Crandley. Thank you for your substantive comments. I'm going to refer back to the supporters of this proposal. And if there are members of the public who would like to speak for 3 minutes in support of this proposal, please raise your hand or press *9 on your telephone. Okay. Is this?
This is Larry Parsons.
Larry, we'll be getting right to you in just a second. We do want to check if there's any supporters.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I don't see any with their hand raised. So we're going to now turn to the other people who are opposed to this, members of the public who are opposed to this petition. And if you are present, please raise your hand or press *9 on your telephone to be recognized. I don't see anyone. Do you, Jackie? Okay, so then we turn back to Mr. Parsons. You have 5 minutes to address the statements that were made in opposition to your proposal.
Am I live now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. The definition of solid waste is nothing that we're bringing onto our site. We're bringing on scrap metals, which are something that we pay money to buy, and solid waste is something people pay you to take it because it has no value, and it actually costs money to get rid of it. And again, we will be doing the exact same thing that JB Salvage and Bloomington Iron Metals have done for 20, 30 years in the Bloomington. And that's strictly buying material, scrap metal. And we buy scrap metal, we process it and resell it, hopefully for a higher price. And it's currently you have operating in the city of Bloomington, the same thing that we hope to do at the site that we're going to. And if it would come along that for some reason we couldn't do scrap metal recycling, we would still want to have the property zoned to heavy manufacturing, as you've indicated that there are heavy manufacturing sites in this area, because we're involved in manufacturing, machining of automotive parts, trimming of automotive parts. We have over 300 people employed running CNC machining centers with robots and everything else that goes along with it, with almost 500,000 square foot of buildings under roof. And that's why today we couldn't tell you for sure what we might have on that site, but we have a site in Bedford that we have that 5 years ago we had nothing on it. Today we have 250,000 square feet and 100 and some people working at that site. And that is just for the trimming of transmission cases for General Motors and moving those on to another location. The description that the attorney for Republic put out talking about waste materials is just so far from reality of what this site would be. And the thought about the drainage coming off of it'll be better than, drainage from most any place that you'll have, because it'll have, a new system that's approved by your people. It just doesn't seem to be much validity to the comments from the attorney from Republic. That would be my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. I wondered if Mr. Schilling wanted to say anything regarding the exclusivity clause that was brought up by Republic.
Well, I don't have that in front of me, but my understanding and talking with IDEM is that items that are not to be placed in the disposal stream are not solid waste. And I talked with one of the regional permit people, and Adam Weinzappel, and he was of the opinion that there would be no IDEM permits required for this kind of a use.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schilling. Okay, I move back to members of the Plan Commission for further discussion and possibly a motion.
I can make a motion, Margaret.
Okay. And I would just like to tell Mr. Crandley that at this time, a rebuttal from is not something that is in our rules and regulations for our procedures. So I see your hand raised, and I'm sorry, we can't recognize you according to our procedures. And Bernie was going to make a motion, but I interrupted him, and I also then saw Mr. Stainbrook's hand raised. And I always like to err on the side of making sure that the ideas of the members of the Plan Commission are recognized. So, Mr. Stainbrook.
Well, Margaret, thank you. This could have waited for discussion after Bernie's motion is seconded. But since you've been so considerate in allowing me to speak now, I'll try to say it more succinctly than sometimes, and then we can move on. I'm wondering, the interested party here involved with the petition has allowed that at some future date, they may want to take in automobiles, trucks, vehicles, and decommission them there by draining, with the mention of IDEM and some other comments and questions. we'd have to consider then the manner in which those fluids, in the manner of which they're disposed. Again, I think it relates to my concern about vehicles. And I realize, Margaret, at this point, we're really just looking at changing the zoning. But I do have that same concern and am relating it now more specifically to the drainage of antifreeze and transmission fluid and engine oil and all of those things that would seem to me, if they were going into my front yard, would be contaminants. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Mr. Steinberg. Mr. McKim?
Yes, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand this correctly, that if the if a change in the text amendment or in the text zoning ordinance text were to be considered that would allow vehicles, it would need to go back through Plan Commission and then back through the Board of Commissioners.
That is correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Garatas, I'm so sorry to have interrupted your motion. But if you would like to proceed, we could entertain that now.
Yeah, you didn't interrupt me, Margaret. I just, there was a long pause, so I assumed it's a discussion, but that, you know, Jim and Jeff obviously added good points to it. So I was happy to step aside for a moment. The matter of case number REZ-22-1. This is a rezone request for a mineral extraction to heavy industrial located at 405 West Dillman Road. I move that we forward this rezone request onto the Executive Board of County Commissioners with a favorable recommendation, with the subject to the findings of fact in the staff report that we have before us, and that with the condition that the business owner is to submit a statement for how the site will be cleaned up in the event of closure for planning staff's review.
I'll second that, Margaret.
Okay.
But Margaret, pardon me. Bernie, I do have a question as this moves toward a vote. You've mentioned a couple of times, twice, I think, the executive board or committee of the Board of County Commissioners. Now, this is detail, but it does go to the Board of County Commissioners for all three commissioners, correct? I don't know of an executive board. But
That's my intent. Yes.
I'm sorry, Bernie, to go to the commissioners.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's what I've seconded, and pardon me, Margaret, thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll? You're muted.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll call the roll on REZ-22-1, Bedford Recycling Petition. Actually, it's a staff recommendation to amend the zoning map from ME to HI in regard to the 30.45 acre site located at 405 West Dillman Road. The motion is to send a favorable recommendation to the commissioners to amend the zoning map from ME to HI for this particular parcel, subject to the findings of fact and with the condition that the owner submit a plan or a statement of how the site would be cleaned up in the event of closure. Again, it would go to the commissioners with a favorable recommendation subject to the conditions in the staff report and the specific condition in regard to a closure plan. D. Owens,
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford, Jim Steenbrook,
Yes.
Julie Thomas,
No.
Amy Thompson,
Yes.
Margaret Clemens,
No.
Trinette Wright Randolph,
Will you come back to me?
Bertie Garitas,
Yes.
Jeff McKim,
Yes.
Tron Randolph,
So when I was on site, I saw how much effort goes into some of the recycling that goes on. And boy, does that seem like a lot of work. I've been pretty apprehensive through this whole petition, and trust me, when the site plan comes, I'm going to be just as involved as I was through the rezone. I said this a couple of different times at the site visit that if we could do something here in Monroe County that could be looked at across the state of, hey, this is a best practice, then I'd be very happy to get behind that. So I'm hoping that as we move forward, we really look at some of these details and not just create the same site, but create something that could be looked at as we did our due diligence. And this is one of the best practicing facilities, you know, that's not going to be cheap either. So I'm going to vote yes.
Okay, the vote is 6-2 to send a favorable recommendation to the commissioners in regard to a petition to amend the zoning map for REZ-22-1 from the parcel at 405 West Dillman Road from ME to heavy industrial.
Thank
We'll
you.
go to the plan. Go to the commissioners now for a hearing at that stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for your good deliberations. We're moving on to the second item on unfinished business, and that's REZ-21-7. And this is 440 East Sample Road rezone from agricultural rural reserve to general business. And this is the final hearing regarding 1.647 plus or minus acre parcel in Washington Township, section 34 at 440 East Sample Road. Mr. Myers, if you're here and if you've been elevated to the panel, could you be so kind as to talk with us through this?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. This is REZ-21-7, the 440 East Sample Road rezone from agri-R to general business. We've heard this one at the Planning Commission level a couple of times now, from the preliminary hearing to a final hearing that was heard in January. And then this is that hearing was continued to this meeting for this petition. So I'll just give a very brief summary and we can go over more details if we have additional questions for this one. It's a 1.647 acre parcel, zoned agricultural rural reserve. They're looking to go to general business for the purposes of constructing a Dollar General that will be about 10,640 square feet and will be classified as a grocery store per a use determination decided by the Monroe County planning staff with respect to the Monroe County zoning ordinance. I have the definition of grocery store here. And if the rezone is approved, the petitioner must submit a commercial site plan for review by planning staff, and all applicable site plan requirements, including but not limited to grading, parking, lighting, and signage must be met by the proposed development. Here we have some summaries of what was discussed at the various levels of committee meetings. We have the Plan Review Committee on November 10th of 2021, and that committee voted 4-0 to forward this petition to the Plan Commission with a negative recommendation with respect to how it fits in line with the Monroe County Comprehensive Plan for this area. And then the first Plan Commission meeting, the preliminary meeting, which was held on December 14th, 2021, there was no motion to vote on this petition during that preliminary hearing, so it got automatically continued to the January hearing. And there was a good conversation during that meeting regarding the location of grocery stores, convenience stores nearby to the petition site. That was a new exhibit had been provided after that conversation. Planning Commission had also requested the petitioner provide a list of proposed items to be sold in the Dollar General, and that items were also included as an exhibit in the staff report. Finally, the Planning Commission met on January 18th, 2022 to discuss the petition during the final hearing. And during that meeting, there was no vote, there was a vote, but the vote was to continue the petition. The Planning Commission members decided that there should be time for the petitioner to provide their own conditions of approval that would address some of the concerns that were outlined during that meeting with regard to the use of the property as a general business zone. And I misspoke during the administrative meeting. The petitioner had actually submitted some materials to be reviewed for the Plan Commission, but I missed that email. But they did have those conditions of approval ready, but they are now included in the staff reports. So I hope you've had time to review them, but they are also included in this presentation this evening. Okay, so here's the location map. I'm going to go through some of these rather quickly because we've heard this so many times. This is I-69 and then Sample Road here going east-west and then eventually north when you're on West Sample Road. Current zoning map as well as the comprehensive plan. Again, agricultural reserve for the zoning and rural residential for the comprehensive plan. Here we have some department comments. Most of these comments are pertaining to the proposed site plan that will be reviewed in more detail from planning staff and these departments if it comes to that. So we can come back to these if we want to discuss any of these details. And then here we have some aerial imagery of the property and then as well as some street view images of the property. Again, here we have one of the exhibits. This is the letter to the Plan Commission from the petitioner. And then this is a preliminary draft site plan to give us an idea of what the site may look like if the rezone were to go through with the county commissioners, who are the last body to make a final decision whether or not the rezone is approved or denied. So what you're seeing here could change. It would be evaluated in the site plan stage. Okay, so this is one of the new additions, one of the new exhibits that were added to the staff report since the last time you saw this. This is a list of locations of Dollar Generals that are operating or will operate with a septic system. So there was some conversation in previous committee meetings regarding the suitability of this large of a building being serviced by a commercial septic system rather than being hooked to sewer. And the petitioners provided this list of locations of Dollar Generals that are already working septic systems or will have them in 2022. We can come back and review some of these. And if you have any questions about any of the sites or septic systems for Dollar General, we can direct those questions to the petitioner and the petitioner's representatives.
Okay.
Here we have just a few more slides here. This one is the, I believe this is the convenience stores that are located close to the petition site. We have the petition site here. We've seen this map before. So just getting a general idea of where some of these convenience stores are located in the county. And this is just a Google search on Google Maps. And we also have here, I'm sorry, this one, the first one, I believe was a search for grocery stores. And then the second image here you see on the screen now, this one is for convenience stores. So you'll note that, you have some gas stations that pop up under that search as compared to grocery stores. Okay, we've also included in this slideshow the permitted uses in the general business zone, as well as the uses here now on your screen in the limited business zone. And we did that because the petitioner in their conditions of approval that they have drafted themselves are essentially stating that they would like to rezone to general business in order to have the ability to establish a grocery store on the site, because it's only permitted in the general business zoning district. But they would be limiting themselves or the property for the future use if Dollar General were to ever leave, that only limited business uses would be permitted here. All right, so planning staff recommendation, this is the recommendation that we've maintained throughout this process, and that is to deny the request to rezone the property from agricultural rural reserve to general business based on the findings of fact. And then, yes, we also have the reiterations of the Plan Review Committee's decision as well here regarding the Monroe County Comprehensive Plan. I will now take any questions.
So do members, Mr. McKim?
Yes, thank you. Drew, I just wanted to make sure, would your recommend, so essentially what they are proposing is for this to be limited business plus grocery, right? Rather than general business. So would your recommendations have changed at all if this were just a petition to rezone to limited business, or would staff's recommendations have been exactly the same regardless?
That's a good question, and Larry and I have discussed that earlier today, and we think that the way that it's worded with being zoned to general business and then going only for the grocery store use and then allowing for all other limited business uses can get a little complicated and tricky to monitor in the future. And I know that Larry has some things that he might want to say about how something like this could potentially be viewed as a spot zone. So I will let him now take over a little bit and discuss some of the other things that we talked about.
Yeah, basically a spot zone is a zone that's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan and is done purely for the convenience of the applicant. And if there's, especially, it got the name spot zone, if there's no other zone, similar zone close by or adjacent. So it looks like a dot on the zoning map. One of the things Drew and I talked about today would be that if the Plan Commission wanted to recommend a rezone to limited business, which is a zone we've used throughout the county, particularly around Lake Monroe, in the small towns and so on, to provide for, again, as it indicates, limited business uses, that might be more appropriate for this site than general business, which would open up really any commercial use to this location. And that an option would be to actually, and a more really consistent option would be in regard to the entire zoning ordinance would be to not try to like add an exception to the limited business for this one site, but actually maybe amend the text of the use for a convenience store to allow a convenience store to be permitted up to 11,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, whatever the Plan Commission would want, provided they provide groceries, including fresh produce, fresh fruits, and meat. And that way you're not just solving basically a food desert problem here, but maybe in other portions of the county, which would allow a small store to go in and sell a variety of items, but would have to be required to sell things like fresh fruit, meat and milk, and those kind of items, vegetables. So that's just thinking out loud here. But that seems like an option that would be better than trying to really look at this one site, zone it general business, but the only use you can do is limited business uses. It creates confusion. Somebody would come in and say, well, this site is general business. Why did you zone it general business? if my site next to it cannot be zoned general business. So I think it makes more sense if you're going to rezone it to a business site, you might want to look at the limited business category and then look at amending the text to modify the use for convenience store to get around this problem of square footage for those stores that desire and want to provide groceries to an unserved area of the county.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Those are good thoughts. Mr. Stainbrook? You're muted, sorry.
Thank you, Margaret. You sure you're sorry, but I know you are. Now, I was trying to say, I'd preface my question by, and not trying to be cute, but really I almost feel as though I should recuse myself because recently I've been in and out of a Dollar General store so frequently, and I find them very handy, but I mustn't go on and on about that. The procedural question I had is in the first instance, as we considered the property on on the west side of 37, our first case. I think Larry and Jackie made it clear that the county and the person of the plan department, I've forgotten now just the detail, but was putting that forward for consideration. And of course, now we've voted on it with the help of Bernie's motion. But in this case, is the petitioner not the representatives of the Dollar General store? So Margaret, that's the question, whether you answer or Larry, what's the difference in the way that these were presented and the people involved and responsible?
Well, thank you, Mr. Stainbrook. I don't know, Drew or Mr. Wilson, if you'd like to answer Mr. Stainbrook's question.
I'll answer for the Bedford recycling site. That was a rezone initiated by the Plan Commission, and this one is a rezone initiated by private petitioners that Drew has on the report.
Thank you, Ms.
Margaret, pardon me, something, and I don't want to belabor anything, but this seems almost mysterious or weird. Something's, why would one be one way? I'm trying for the perfect words, and sometimes that slows me way down to where it's nonsense. I just don't see why the two would be handled differently. Why the county or the plan department would run interference for Bedford recycling. And normally we deal with petitioners who are individual or related representing some concern. This thing about Bedford recycling compared or contrasted with what we have before us here, it's different.
I'll explain just before I turn it over to Jackie. The Bedford recycling was heard first at the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then it came before the Plan Commission. This is different. This was solely originated by the petitioner. And Jackie, if you want to clarify any more, Mr. Wilson, please feel free to do so. But
sure. So I will just note that, Jim, at the January administrative meeting of the Plan Commission, we did bring the Bedford recycling case to the Plan Commission to have a vote to say whether it was appropriate to bring it forward by the Plan Commission. And so it was preceded with a vote by the Plan Commission to proceed with the Plan Commission as the petitioner for that vote. I do want to loop in David Schilling, since this is the Bedford recycling site is an active litigation case. So if Mr. Schilling wants to weigh in on any other details of the case or why Plan Commission is the representative, that would be ideal. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say that the statute allows for petitions to be initiated by the Plan Commission or by private landowners. So there's more than one way that a petition can come forward. And the planning staff has on numerous occasions in the past brought forth rezone petitions. And usually, though, it's done by a private landowner. So, you know, they are different. They're brought forth by different reasons, or by, you know, by different different objectives. This was the Bedford recycling was presented to the BZA, and the BZA voted to approve it as a conditional use because they thought the site was appropriate for that. We concluded later that they'd made a mistake in going forward in that fashion. And so the staff said, well, since everyone thought that this was a good location, the staff looked at it and agreed. And so that's why they brought it forth. The Plan Commission voted on it, and that's why it was on the agenda tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. I'll recognize Mr. Wilson, then Mr. McKim, and then Mr. Stainbrook.
I'll put my hand down. I don't have anything to add to what Dave says.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. McKim?
Thank you. I really appreciate Mr. Wilson's comments and suggestion here as to how to move forward. I kind of wish I had heard that in earlier meeting, because I think it makes a lot of sense. If you look at the map, a general business zoning really would look like a spot zoning. I mean, it just from the visual, I don't think that's that's true with limited business. Although it's not immediately adjacent, it is very close to a fairly substantial limited business district, and is right alongside a road that is right now in the process of being improved and widened. So I think, you know, from the perspective of the surrounding area, I think limited business actually makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, the grocery store, which I think would be a valuable amenity to the residents of northern Bloomington and Washington and Benton townships, is not compatible with, is not permitted in the limited business zone. But I think Mr. Wilson has a really good suggestion for expanding the definition, if and only a convenience store, if and only if the facility would also provide fresh produce and meats and that sort of thing. So I'm interested in what others hear about that, but I think that's a really I think a way of moving forward that is much more in keeping with the surrounding area.
Thank you, Mr. McKim. Mr. Stainbrook?
Well, I appreciate the concern for spot zoning. I spoke with that ad nausea, but I'm interested in that. And then for Dave's explanation, which I appreciate, but I mean, it's prima facie that these are different. We just spent time and time again, really, on this first case. And and I understand then from Dave's comments that this has been done before. But I'm going to say that this, for some reason, I don't know what's going on. So often I don't know what's going on, but this is rather Byzantine. And I'm not, there's something, what is it? Rural, Dollar General is not going to, they do not, and they are not going to sell, as I've experienced it in all these trips I just cited, real life, you know, buying containers and cat food and so on down here. They don't sell bananas and grapefruits. They don't do that. So we're getting into this grocery store thing here again. And I defer to Jeff's analysis of Larry's proposal. I don't have a question about Larry's proposal. Maybe shouldn't even have mentioned those things, except Dollar General is not going to sell fruits and vegetables. Now, well, maybe they will, but that's not the business that I have seen and experienced firsthand. Now, this Byzantine thing something's going on here with legal again, and I don't mean legal by Dave Schilling in that context. I mean legality with court cases or something. Something, I can't say it stinks because it may all be very proper, but I'm not getting the full explanation. I didn't need an attorney or a director of planning to tell me that these were handled in a different way. So I guess my question, well, I'm not going to try and frame it in a question. I have a grave concern about what's going on. In the other case I did, and I do here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steinbrook. Mr. Enright Randolph.
Sorry, I'm doing my best to look at the 2,700 pages of items you can purchase at Dollar General. That's pretty extensive, and I would assume comprehensive list. I'll let the petitioner address that when we move to them. I wanted to echo Mr. McKim's comments that the suggestion of looking at this in a light business and allowing maybe this type of use is very advantageous. And I think that goes kind of with some of my first comments when we were looking at this, is this whole general area should be re-looked at. Incremental growth, I guess. One thing I'm a little apprehensive of is requiring, a business to sell things that they are not in the practice of doing. I still see a lot of value that a Dollar General store, and my understanding of what they provide, and I've been to a handful myself. I don't really see fresh produce too often. I'm not gonna, like I said, I did my best of looking at those 2,700 pages. But if that's not something they're in the business of doing, I don't feel like we should, ask them to do something like that. But I do feel like a Dollar General, the ones I'm typically frequenting, could work really well in that area. So I'm curious if we just want to look at the text and change the limited business to allow this type of use without conditioning fresh produce and things of that nature. So those are my thoughts, because I would hate to put another onerous burden on the property owner to sell things that are outside of their business platform. But I do think that a Dollar General could serve the community very well in that area. And I also think looking at that area in a more of a comprehensive way could be very beneficial as well. It's an interesting time with us, looking at our county development ordinance and such. Those are my comments, and I would be curious of what other plan commission members are thinking, because I would love to see them be able to provide this type of service, maybe even in a limited business, maybe with certain conditions that they have to meet, but not to the effect of we're asking them to sell something that they're not in the business of doing. And that's another question for the petitioner. Are you in the business of selling fresh produce and food like you'd see at a normal grocery store? So when you get to discussing, please try to address those questions. I'll ask them again if you don't.
Thank you, Mr. Enright Randolph. Mr. Wilson?
I just wanted to comment that my proposal in regard to adding the additional use with conditions for limited business was really not designed to benefit Dollar General, but really to provide this option in the LB zone. It might be a private, individual who wants to put a small grocery store, convenience store somewhere out in the county, not necessarily a chain. Secondly, I believe that the real issue is the need to have fresh food and grocery items available, so people don't have to make a special trip in, especially if they have difficulty traveling, from their remote portions of the county. So I do think it's important that if you're going to allow the special dispensation to have a larger store in the limited business, that you do require a certain mix of grocery items to really eliminate the food desert type issues that can happen in rural areas as well as urban areas.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Do other members of the plan, Mr. Enright Randolph?
Yes, thank you. I agree with Larry. I do think it would be neat to address this issue, more broadly. I think there could be a mutual interest of figuring out conditions where we're not asking certain, businesses to do things outside of their platform, so like maybe a handful of certain types of items here and certain types of items there, that we could really look at this more subjectively and add some type of use. I wouldn't want to alienate larger chains due to the fact that they don't have fresh produce, but I do agree with Larry that we should be looking at it with both lenses, where we can allow a grocery use in a limited business that does provide fresh produce. But I still feel like, if someone wants to come here and starts a company that's in this business and they don't want to, change what they provide, that we should be looking at creating conditions that accommodate them to not just Dollar General, but kind of both your moms and pops and a larger company.
Thank you, Mr. Enright Randolph. Well, I think it's time to turn to the petitioner and or the petitioner's representative. And Mr. McDonough, if you are here, you have 15 minutes all total to speak to the Plan Commission, you and perhaps a colleague if you are here with another person, to address the Plan Commission regarding your proposal. If you would unmute yourself.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Sorry, technical difficulties there. Sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight and all the chat and everything that's going on. I do want to address one thing on the grocery items. It is not uncommon to have fresh produce and also other typical grocery items in Dollar General locations. Now, I can't speak to all the ones that are available there in Bloomington itself, but I do know that is something that they have added, and also is one of the reasons why they have added a larger size store versus the 9,100, which was their standard. Now they're at a 10,640 square foot store. And then on the rest of it, I'd like to then let John Kraft speak on to that, please.
For the record, my name is John Kraft. I'm with the law firm of Young, Lind, Anderson Kraft in New Albany, Indiana, appearing on behalf of the petitioner. I guess my first thought would be that certainly Mr. Wilson's comments would have been much better taken back when we started this process back in September, when we asked initially for a use determination, which ultimately indicated it had to be a grocery store, and that was only permitted in a GB district. Certainly those comments would have been better taken at that point in time, but we've been through the process, and certainly beginning with a plan review committee meeting in November, and then ultimately up through the last meeting that was February 1st, which was an administrative meeting. And part of the basis for that was for us to provide certain bits of information to the Plan Commission, certain bits of information to the staff, which we complied with and provided those. I will kind of walk through the process because I do think when we look at this issue, Mr. Wilson made the comment about spot zoning, and certainly I've done this for 38, 39 years, and spot zoning is an issue that frequently gets brought up. But the element that he touched on, and I think it's important to note, if we look at the zoning, and he touched on the fact that there was zoning of the same nature of limited business in close proximity. And if we look at this from a overall perspective, there's limited business lots that are to the west of this site. They're also on the eastern side of I-69 State Road 37. We also have to remember that a number of LB parcels were taken as part of the I-69 project, which took away a number of those LB uses. So the result of that tends to be that while in a normal sense, you might look at this as spot zoning, I think you have to look at the close proximity. There is a limited business in the same proximity of this. And then likewise, limited business that was lost by virtue of I-69. Certainly 3674603 gives you those elements to look at, the comprehensive plan. And again, I know that the comments been made, we've heard this quite a bit, and we have. And certainly from that perspective, when you look at the comprehensive plan, and several of the members tonight have even addressed that and have addressed it in previous meetings, whether it be Mr. Enright Randolph or Mr. McKim, that we're looking at an area that for all practical purposes should be something of this nature, should be limited business, should be something of that nature. And as a result of that, the comprehensive plan, and I said this before, and I know there's been exception taken, but the comprehensive plan really is not up to date with what has happened with I-69 here. And when we look at that and we look at the fact that this should be an area that should be developed in a commercial sense, and certainly GB may be a bit much because under your ordinance, the general business district is intended to meet the needs, and this is verbatim, intended to meet the needs for heavy retail business uses. General business uses should be placed into cohesive groupings. Now, what we have proposed, and again, this goes back to the request for us to give you some conditions. And one of those things that we have proposed is dealing with this because we have to be GB because of the size, not because of the use, but because of the size. My client has indicated, and it's the conditions that we proposed, that certainly if we're granted a GB for purposes of the operation of the Dollar General, then certainly we were willing to and still willing to address the fact that if this is any other use subsequent to the Dollar General, that it will fall under the LB district. Mr. Meyer specifically put on your screen the elements with regards to those uses that can be in a limited business district. And limited district is intended, and this again is a quote directly from your ordinance, is intended to meet the essential business needs and convenience of neighboring residents, end quote. Its purposes are to encourage the development of groups of non-residential uses that share common highway access. We look at the improvement that's been done specifically to the roadway, those improvements that are still being planned for Sample Road. And we look at the fact that this is a major collector road. It's not a rural road, it's a major collector road. So when we look at that, we look at the improvements, we look at those considerations. Those are the conditions and character of elements under 36703B that you have to look to. And when you look at that issue, and certainly the conclusion reached by the staff report in that was, as we've talked about before, there's no access to sewer at this site, and therefore it doesn't support the zoning district. We have provided to you, and certainly if there are questions, I know that Mr. McDonough is more than happy to address those questions with regards to the commercial septic systems that are put on other Dollar Generals. The issue with regards to the produce, things of that nature, I live in a rural community and there is a Dollar General in Lanesville, Indiana, at the intersection of Highway 62 and the entrance road that you take on to get on I-64. they carry fresh produce. So it's not as if they're changing a business model to meet the requirements of Monroe County. That's part of what they do, and it depends upon the location of a Dollar General as to what they may put on the shelf and what they may provide. And once again, Dollar General has indicated they're willing to do those things, and it's not against their business model. It just happens to be a rural area that they're willing to do that. Certainly, had the comments made by Mr. Wilson been given to us previously and looked at the text amendment, trying to do that first, that may have been a way to look at this. But I think when we look at it overall, I think the consensus of a number of the members tends to be, this is the proper place for a Dollar General. How do we get there? And certainly the way that we're providing to get there is allow the GB rezoning with an understanding of written commitments that will be placed of record that will specifically limit this use to a LB use, those elements and those uses that are listed in your ordinance, subsequent to the Dollar General. Dollar Generals, if you're familiar with them, and Mr. Stainbrook has indicated that he is quite familiar with them, but if you're familiar with them, once they're there, they tend to stay. And certainly from that perspective, they may not be going anywhere and may continue to operate, provided we get the rezoning, that they will continue to operate at that location. So I don't think we really have to worry about the confusion, quote unquote, with regards to dropping back to an LB. Because the LB district, the uses are set out in your chart, and we're certainly there and will agree to those. I think when we look at the responsible development and growth, we've got, again, a major collector road, which is East Sample Road. It intersects with Old State Road 37. And when we look at that issue and the accessibility road-wise, you couldn't ask for a better place for this type of a use. We're not dealing with a small, narrow county road that is not a collector. And when we look at that issue, we have to deal with that. And then lastly, and again, while it's out of order, conservation of property value. We've not heard anything specifically. In fact, the only thing that I recall, and I presented it, was we have other members, other owners that are in close proximity to this that are waiting in the wings, hoping that this happens because they believe their property values are going to skyrocket when they try to then go to do something with their property based upon I-69 corridor, where it is, as well as the improvements that have been made to Sample Road and are projected on Sample Road. The most desirable use, again, I think that the use surrounding this, when we look to the LB to the west of this, when we look to the LB that ultimately was taken by the I-69 corridor, I think that all of those factors under 36-74603 that you have to give due consideration to, we meet all of those requirements. And certainly we meet them when we look at the fact that we're willing to enter into a conditional rezone that takes that back to an LB. And certainly you can work on the text all you want and make those changes consistent with granting the rezone here that'll then give you that opportunity for other types of uses that won't have to go through the 4.5 months in order to try to get here. And certainly we're prepared to move forward on it. We would ask that you send it forward to the county commissioners with a favorable recommendation. Certainly I'll take any questions you may have of me. And then likewise, any questions you may have of Mr. McDonough with respect to the septic system, the commercial septic system. But we're asking this evening that you forward this on with a favorable recommendation with those conditions that we have proposed and we have agreed to, and we're willing to, again, place those of record so it will carry with the land and be a covenant that runs with the land from this time forward as it relates to the zone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and certainly we would hope that we can move forward with a favorable recommendation.
You're muted, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you. We move now to members of the public. If there are members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition, would you please raise your hand or press *9 if you're calling in from a cell phone? And this segment is for people in favor of the petition. And I don't think we see anyone, do we, Jackie? Okay, so now we move to members of the public who might be opposed to this petition. If you would raise your hand or press *9. Okay, we don't see that. Without any comments from the public, do we give a rebuttal to the petitioner, Jackie?
I wouldn't say that there would be one necessary.
Okay, well, then I turn back to members of the Plan Commission for further discussion and or a motion. Mr. Bernie Caritas.
Okay, well, the whole topic of the general business relevance with the grocery store, looking at the entire list, that was brought up by me at the last meeting, and the goal wasn't to throw a curveball on anything. It was the way the discussion was going was to have a dialogue through the Planning Commission of what that really meant. We've gone through these rezones for years and years and years, where we have put conditions of approval on uses, and one of the factors that we look at is what's the burden on staff to be able to keep track of what we're doing here. I have and still remain very confident in my opinion that this use is extremely well suited for this property. This location, we've had no remonstrators against it. As far as the benefit of a grocery store versus a convenience store and buying household consumables such as milk, I would much rather buy milk from a store such as this as opposed to a convenient mart, unless I really need milk, right? That's what the convenience is for. To me, this is a benefit and a convenience as an adjective for the people around it, and I think it's in a very good location for it. I look at the corridor up and down I-69, and I see furniture stores, I see manufacturing. I think we're going to have a fire station. There was an old light store. We've got a winery. I'm not getting in particular on all the zones with those. I think most of them are probably not within the zone that they are set up for, but regardless, this is what the corridor looks like. The fact that this is an exit off I-69 that allows for this service and for people to jump on and jump back off again, I think is extraordinary. I think it's a low imposition site. This nature, from my experience with on-site sewer, doesn't give me any pause at all, where other properties might. There's just not a large consumption of water typically with these. I think the petitioner's representative went through that at the last meeting or potentially the meeting before. So, I just think it's a great use. If I were living in this area, I would like to see it. As far as the limited business, it's a very intriguing possibility. I think that the petitioner has been through a long process, and I as Jerry said at the last meeting, the site doesn't afford itself to most of the uses that would be on the general business slate. So if I were going to bring up any conversation that I would be curious about other plan commissions, I'll get myself in trouble again. But we talk about the staff burden. If the staff has one use that they're concerned with, when we've definitely given approvals striking down uses, having one use for the staff to monitor is much easier than the staff having 50% to monitor. I would like to see this move on with a positive recommendation, with the condition that this only be for the grocery store use as defined in the general business. And again, that's a condition similar to what we've done many times in the past. So Again, the conversation last week was brought up because of the conversations that were going on at the time. I felt compelled to bring up the discussion and make sure that everybody was on a clear thinking line. And I'm still glad we did. But I would like to see this move forward as a grocery store, it will be a neighborhood service area that many people will benefit from. So that's all I've got right now. Thanks.
Is that a motion, Bernie?
I can make it a motion, but I just don't want to thwart other comments with regard to
I'm
that,
sorry. Yeah.
Mr. Steinberg.
If Margaret's ready for a motion, and if it is a motion, I'll second Bernie.
Ms. Jelen?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that there was one plan commission meeting where it was brought up that this property would have a pole sign that may be directed towards the I-69 corridor. So as you're thinking, if you are considering a positive or favorable recommendation and you are considering conditions, if you are looking at the aesthetics of the corridor and trying to limit pole signs or things of that nature, you may want to consider that as part of your recommendation.
Thank you. That was very helpful, Ms. Nestor Jelen. Okay. Is there any further discussion? Mr. McKim?
I guess I'll just, in general, I agree with Bernie. I mean, I do, like I said before, I like Larry's suggestion. I do wish we could have considered that path earlier. And I'm still willing to consider that path, but I do think that this is what the petitioner has approved is a very appropriate use for this parcel and very much in keeping with what that area has become and what it's going to become even further with the expansion of Sample Road. So I'm basically in support of whatever means we can take to move the project forward.
Thank you, Mr. McKim. Mr. Wilson, and then myself.
I just wanted to note that the use determination was made in March of 2021. And whenever we make these use determinations, we are available if petitioners want to talk about different options and so on. In this case, they applied for a rezone to general business. But it's not like we said, you have to apply for a rezone to general business. There's other options as well. Text amendments to allow use in a certain zone. Plan unit developments are always an option. We try not to direct the petitioner as to what action to take. However, we are available to brainstorm with them in most cases.
Thank you, Mr.
The other
Wilson.
thing there's one other thing I do want to mention is we have some uses that are permitted in limited business and not permitted in general business. And so that creates a quandary as to what exactly this would mean in this circumstance. Not likely to come up, but again, that's why the other option I feel is a cleaner, more consistent way of approaching it.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And I would just like myself to comment and reiterate some comments that I've made before. Number one, that this isn't a business corridor yet. And even though there are plans to build a road there and the off-ramp has been designed, the people in this area of the county have said pretty resoundingly they'd like the rural to remain rural. And if we want to make this a business corridor, then we should rezone the area. This is not, this is spot zoning, as has been said before. It's surrounded by agricultural land. And I just don't think that that this is appropriate here. So I just want to go on the record once again is to tell you that it's agricultural land and it's surrounded by other agricultural land. and the people in the rural areas have said that they want to remain rural. And so that's my comment for today. And I'll recognize Mr. Stainbrook.
Well, Madam President, you hang in there. I'm still rural, and urban, even though the details here may be somewhat different. But Byzantia, I guess, is now Constantinople, and I had an epiphany. I got the whole thing figured out. I do understand now what's going on earlier and what might go on here. I think Mr. Kraft could be, it's going to go to the commissioners, and the commissioners will decide. But I think even if it gets to the commissioners, I still support Bernie's motion when he makes it. And I think it would be a good thing, but I appreciate very much the comments of our president. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stainbrook. Mr. McKim?
You're on mute, Jeff.
Sorry, this is just a follow-up to Ms. Nestor Jellen's comments about the pole sign. Can you go on into a little more detail about what the issue is and what a recommended condition would be in that case?
So right now, the planning department is enjoined from requiring sign permits for sites in Monroe County. But for pole signs in particular, under the comprehensive plan, we've tried to remove or reduce the number of pole signs, especially in gateways and along highway corridors. There's been some discussion in the I-69 plan, the corridor plan, comprehensive plans, rural plan framework to try to reduce the sort of visual billboard or pole sign look as you drive I-69. And so based on where this petition site is located, you know, I'm not sure, it just shows a pole sign proposed on the site plan. And so if that was something that you wanted to consider and would rather just have like a wall sign, which is affixed to the actual building and not separate from the building, that could be a condition, just to say no pole signs means no freestanding signs that can be up to 25 feet tall. So.
Thank you. I guess I'd be interested in hearing other plan commissioners' thoughts on that.
Well, I'd like to say that to me, the beauty of the approach to Bloomington is very important. And when it becomes over, for lack of a better word, when it becomes with kind of cluttered with more billboards and more signage, I think that one of the most important aspects of our community is taken away, and that is its beauty. I mean, it's been immortalized in paintings by T.C. Steele, and I would hate to see, you know, the signage get in the way of that. And then there's also another factor involved, and we should be concerned about light pollution. We should be, because over in Steinsville, and light pollution carries a long way. You know, we have some areas of the sky and of the area that are night sky rated. We're right next to a county forest and reserve up here in the Morgan Monroe County forest area, where you can get some dark skies and see the stars. So I think that protecting some of these areas from light pollution could be an economic development initiative for our county. I think it's an important initiative for our county because we do have some night sky rated areas, and this is pretty close to one. Mr. McKim?
Well, I was going to make a motion, but if anybody else wants to comment before I make a motion, I'll defer.
Well, Mr. McKim, let's have your motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In the matter of REZ-21-7, 440 East Sample Road, rezone request from Ag RR to general business. I move that we forward this to the Board of Commissioners with a favorable recommendation with the following two conditions. One, that the written commitments with respect to restricting the use that have already been published in the packet be recorded. And two, that pole sign be prohibited.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll?
Claire, you're muted.
I'm sorry. The motion is to send a favorable recommendation to the commissioners in regard to petition RAZ-21-7, 440 East Sample Road zoning map amendment from Ag-R to general business, subject to the commission set forth in regard to limiting the uses to limited business. And secondly, that a pole sign not be allowed and that the site would be limited to a monument sign. And that those two factors be put into written commitments prior to passage of the ordinance. Again, a motion in favor is a vote to send a favorable recommendation to commissioners subject to those two conditions. Jerry, it's Jim Stainbrook.
Yes.
Julie Thomas.
No.
Amy Thompson.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
No.
Tron Irene Randolph.
Yes.
Bernie Garitas.
Quick question. Is there a difference between restricting a pole sign and limiting a sign to a monument sign?
I think that's your two options under our ordinance would be either a pole sign or what we consider to be a monument sign.
Okay, and the monument sign is also okay. That answers my question. I vote yes. It was just a little bit different from what Jeff articulated. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, and I just was trying to make it clear that what we were talking about was limited to the option of a monument sign. And under our ordinance, a monument sign can have two poles with a sign in between it. It's just that a pole sign is like typically higher, 15 feet.
Okay, my vote is yes.
Jeff McKim.
Yes.
Dee Owens.
No.
Okay, the vote is 5-3 to send a favorable recommendation to the commissioners that goes on to the commissioners. And there'll be a public hearing in regard to the ordinance at that stage.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Kraft and Mr. McDonough, for coming before us today. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on now to item 3 under unfinished business, and this is ZOA-21-8, the amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance, page 44, chapter 815, site plans, having to do with certified site plans. And this is the final hearing. Ms. Nestor, if you could discuss that with us.
Yes, thank you, Margaret. So this is an amendment to chapter 815, which is in regard to site plan review. Sorry, must have pressed the wrong button here. So the blue text and red text in the on the screen are showing you the different changes that we've made to this chapter. The purpose of this text amendment is to incorporate and specify what type of development requires a certain level of certification of a site plan or a plot plan, or if something can just allow for a scaled drawing. Right now, we require all commercial sites to have a certified site plan. That will not be changing under this ordinance. But for residential new construction, we do not have a certified site plan or certified plot plan requirement. And so in speaking with some of the builders associations, several surveyors in the area, we have tried to put together a text amendment that would require a certified plot plan for new residential construction. And we've tried to carefully think out what are the different requirements that may be involved in that certified plot plan to make them a little bit less of a burden than a full certified site plan, which is the highest bar, but at the same time, give us enough information to show that they're able to meet other ordinance requirements. So under this chapter text amendment, you will see that we've put together a illustration for commercial is in the red box. Residential structure, principal structures are in the blue box, and then accessory structures are in the black box. And we've put under this table sort of the applicability. And the way that our ordinance is structured right now is it could be interpreted to show that all sites and all building permit applications could require a certified site plan. And so because that's a high bar for the Monroe County residents to follow, we're trying to specify that certain things can allow for a scaled drawing. But in the event that we do need a certified plot plan or boundaries shown and surveyed, we can request those and have a better site plan or plot plan to review prior to permitting. So underneath the applicability, we also have shown all of the uses that we have in either 802 or 833, which covers the fringe zones. And that's to help people at the forefront to say, what type of site plan or am I going to be required to do a plot plan? This is my use and this is my type of construction. So that's hopefully very clear for the public to read as well as staff. And then we've also put together a table showing you the different requirements that will be for each type of review. So, and there will also be the illustration to the left of those letters so that as you're going along, you can see whether or not that's being met or what's being required. So we've heard this a few times, but I do want to note that we've made a few changes as we've gone along. We tried to work with the Stormwater division as well, since they have the new Rule 5 is called Construction Stormwater General Permit. And so we're trying to make sure that we're compliant for what they'll be looking for sites to make sure that they're compliant with drainage, as well as our sites and what we're looking for to make sure that they meet buildable area, setbacks, things like that. And so some of the changes that we've made as of late is that we're trying to make sure that for sites that include like a location, setbacks, improvement areas really for residential accessories, that we would be able to, for lots 2.5 acres or greater, we could do a deed of record illustrative property boundary because we're, for a site that has 100 acres, it would be very costly to do a full boundary survey. But in the event that they're getting really close to a lot line or we're not able to tell based on the best available data, we could ask them to either amend the building location or get a actual survey of that property boundary. So we are trying to be cognizant of the additional costs that will be associated with this, but also cognizant of the requirements already set out in the ordinance and what we're looking for to make sure that people are compliant and able to have structures that, withstand any constraints from karst or floodplain or things like that. Trying to see if we have any other requirements that have changed. We did say that we needed to see slope lines of 15%, but if located in the environmental constraint overlay, then show the applicable slope lines. That could be 12%, could also be 18% based on areas 1 and 3. So I think that those are the main changes that we've made as of late, but I'll take any questions that you might have on this text amendment.
Okay, do members of the Plan Commission have any questions for Ms. Nestor-Jelen? Is there any discussion? Then I'm going to move to the public and ask the public if there are people hear from the public who would like to speak in favor of this amendment and this change to the Monroe County zoning ordinance, please raise your hand or press *9 on your telephone to be recognized. Do we see anybody? I don't think we do, but let me just, I don't see anybody. Okay, so if there's any member of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this amendment, please raise your hand or press *9. Okay, we have one person, Mr. Randy. We would like you to, you have 3 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, Margaret, this is Randy Cassidy. The question I have in regards to this text amendment in that, has this been discussed with the Monroe County Building Association at all? And I guess that would just be a question in regards to what it is. And then as I look through these text amendments, I see a significant amount of items that just leave it to the administrator themselves. So from the text amendment, I'm not complaining. I'm just simply asking the question. Is this, from an administrator standpoint, will that be the individual that is responsible for the petition itself, or will be that be the director, or will that be the plan commission? So 2 questions in regards to it. One being the Monroe County Building Association, have they seen it and given any review on it? And then who actually will make the determination from an administrator standpoint if these meet the criteria or not?
Thank you, Mr. Cassidy. And although we don't normally allow the public to ask staff questions directly, I'd like to sponsor his questions. And Ms. Nestor Jelen, if you would be so kind as to answer those very questions.
Sure. So yes, we were engaged with the Building Association. They did take this to a meeting and involve surveyors as well as the Building Association. And I will say that there were some in the Building Association that were displeased with the text amendment, and then some of them that believe that this would be better off for a lot of new construction, brand new construction of primary residential structures. So there was some that were in opposition, some were in support. And then there is some discretion built into this text amendment that allows for the administrator's discretion as defined in the ordinance that is the planning director. And the purpose of that discretion is that in some circumstances, it needs to be determined whether a use is accessory or principal in order to determine whether it's a plot plan or a scaled drawing. Those will be the most, I would say, back and forth, needing any kind of determination. And then also there's some circumstances where, let's say there's already an existing foundation and someone's replacing a structure exactly in that same foundation, and we're able to go under pre-existing non-conforming. There may be circumstances where we're able to utilize other portions of the ordinance and not require a certified plot plan in those situations, and only a scale drawing.
Thank you, Ms. Nestor Jelen. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this change? If not, I bring it back to the Plan Commission for further discussion and or motion.
I will also say, Margaret, I think Kelsey Thatonia is also on the line if she wants to speak from the stormwater perspective, if there are any questions. And I've also spoken with the building department, and there have been some expressed concerns that I feel are necessary to bring up. And that's just that this is bringing on a cost to the residents of Monroe County, and it is a change. And so that's something that, as we've been looking at this text amendment, we've tried to put in the basic necessary requirements as it relates to our ordinance and what's already written into the text that we need to be able to verify compliance for. So that is something that we have taken into account, and we will be making amendments and changes to this ordinance if there are things that come up and that just simply don't work. So we are hoping that as we see this through, it will be open to amendments as necessary. But we do understand the gravity of this type of text amendment. This will involve some change for people that, if they're not tuning into CATS on all occasions, they may, we will want to get some communication out there early so that people can hopefully, that are in the process right now, be able to get on board with getting a certified plot plan when they need it.
Thank you, Ms. Nestor-Jelen. And I would, at your suggestion, like to recognize Ms. Thetonia to make any comments that she would like to about this. If you're still.
Hi, thank you. Hi, this is Kelsey. I just want to thank Jackie for doing so much of the work to reach out to local stakeholders and others about this change. It is something that is going to help us so much on the plan review side. When I took over for Terry Quillman, he has in the new Stormwater Technical Standards Manual a requirement for a certified plot plan. I think that this is definitely a step in the right direction and a good demonstration of really working with our community and what is going to work best for our residents. So yeah, I just want to, thank Jackie for putting all the work into this, and it's going to complement the upcoming new stormwater ordinance very well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Thetonia. Mr. Garitas?
Yeah, just a quick question, I think, and it's one I've asked, I think, on a couple different occasions. From a practitioner standpoint, land surveyors in particular, potentially civil engineers and less likely an architect, a plot plan is a, generally speaking, it's a two-dimensional drawing. And by that, I mean, it doesn't show changes in elevation. It doesn't show any topography. And so am I looking at this correct? Let me get on my other screen here. If I mute out, I'll fix that on my own. So for residential, in what cases do residential structures need to show contours, slope lines, and other features? Vertical, that show a vertical topography.
Yeah, so what we have put into the text amendment, Bernie, is 2-foot contours or spot elevations of finished grade, including finished first floor elevations. And so I know that's a little bit outside the scope of maybe a typical plot plan, but we were trying to make sure that we were compliant in this one in particular with what the stormwater will be looking to make sure that there's positive drainage to the site.
My only observation might be is that there are other ways to look at positive drainage on a site without having to go through for a residential building permit to determine what the gradient is, what the effects of what the proposed elevations are. So you answered my question. Thanks, Jack. Yeah, that I was just a little, that just kind of gets way out of the nature of the original discussion of the plot plan option. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion by members of the Plan Commission? If not, could we have a motion? Mr. McKim?
Okay, I'll make one in the matter of ZOA-21-8 amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance, chapter 815, site plans, certified site plans. I move that we forward to the Board of Commissioners with a favorable recommendation, the text amendments as presented.
Second. Yeah, I will call the roll on ZOA-21-8. It's a text amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance, chapter 815, site plans, to require certified site plans and plot plans in regard to and other scale drawings for types of development. The motion is send a favorable recommendation to the commissioners for passage. Jim Steenbrook,
Yes.
Julie Thomas,
Yes.
Amy Thompson,
Yes.
Margaret Clemens,
Yes.
Toronto Aaron Randolph,
Yes.
Bernie Garitas,
There we go. I said I'd fix it. No.
Jeff McCann,
Yes.
Dee Owens.
Yes.
The motion's approved 7-1 to send a favorable recommendation to the commissioners in regard to the text amendment COA-21-8.
Great, thank you. We're moving on to new business, and the first item under new business is ZOA-21-11, and this is an amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance, Chapter 801, definitions. This is the preliminary hearing having to do with an amendment to the change in use definition with an addition of definitions for certified site plan, certified plot plan, structure commercial, structure residential, and structure residential accessory. Ms. Nestor Jelen, would you?
Yes, thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
So this is to complement the Chapter 815 changes that we have ongoing that was discussed previously. And this is a way for us to tie chapters 815 to chapter 801, which is where we have the definitions. The change in use also is trying to make sure that for any unit that there is something where a bedroom count is different from what's on the property report card, that we are able to verify septic systems as part of a remodel permit for an improvement location permit. So that's something that's also tied to a chapter 814. So we're trying to keep all of these amendments clean as we move ahead. And then it's also removing some older language regarding classes of uses from different classes. It was previously used to try to, I guess, categorize or silo certain uses as being similar so that if you went from antique to floral shop, you wouldn't have to consider that a change of use. But it's actually not well matched with what the current uses are in the ordinance. And we felt like, we haven't really utilized, we consider a change of use if you're changing from one use to any other use in the ordinance. And so this categorization was not really something that has been utilized or updated. And so we're suggesting that we just change it to say, if you're changing from one use in the table to another use, it is a change in use. And that clarifies quite a bit for us. So that's the text amendment for classes of uses. And then the structures as part of the 815. Go ahead and go down to that part. Sorry, it's a long chapter. So as you recall from the chapter 815, there were 3 columns for the different types of structures. So there was commercial structure, residential structure, as well as residential accessory structure. So we wanted to add a definition as well in the ordinance to make sure that it's tied back to chapter 815 again, and make sure that a commercial structure by definition requires a certified site plan under chapter 815 prior to issuance of an ILP. So that's something that we wanted to make sure was in the ordinance. This is a preliminary hearing, so we do want to get any feedback from the Plan Commission about how best to utilize these definitions, and if there are changes that need to be made, we want to do that before the final hearing of this. But we want to try and keep it consistent and make sure that we're keeping up with the different new terminology that we're adding as we're trying to make amendments to existing chapters. I'll take any questions.
Okay, does anyone have questions for Ms. Nestor Jelen? Okay, I'd like to open it up to the public. Do members of the public have any comments or questions? If so, please raise your hand or press *9 on your telephone. Okay, Mr. Cassidy, you have 3 minutes if you would kindly unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Am I unmuted?
You're fine. We can hear
Okay,
you.
thank you very much. The question I have in regards to this ordinance from the count on the property record card to the aspect, is that specifically dealing with the septic issue, or is that just dealing with, what's the purpose on that? I mean, I understand septic. Curious if it's based on that, or if it's based on, what's it based on?
That is something that we would be reviewing specific to septic, since those have a capacity based on the number of bedrooms.
Okay, so determining, just a determination based upon how many sleeping people there are in that residence. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other items from the public for discussion? Or anybody would like to weigh in on this? We will be hearing this again, right, Jackie?
That is correct.
Okay, so any further discussion among members of the Plan Commission? If not, we don't take a vote on this tonight, so we will hear this again in next month at our regular meeting. So the next item on our agenda is a rezone, REZ-21-8, and this is the Hinkle rezone from Agricultural Rural Reserve to General Business. This is a preliminary hearing, and they have requested waiver of a final hearing regarding 2 8.6 plus or minus acre parcels in Richland Township, Section 24 at 4833 West Arlington Road. So Ms. Behrman, if you're here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there you are.
Yep, finally.
Yes.
All right. So one thing I want to note is the owner of the property are Susan and Stephen Hinkle, and Susan is on the line this evening and can answer any questions about the site later on. The petition or the applicant is Spring Point Architect, and Dawn Gray is kind of a representative for this rezone, and she is also here this evening. And then just to kind of cover my bases, Duncan Campbell from the Historic Preservation Board is also on the line. So basically, this is a proposal to rezone 2 parcels from Ag RR to General Business, GB zoning. If this rezone is approved, the land would transfer to Lindemann and Associates Psychological Services to develop an office use. And that office use is described in Exhibit 6 under use determination. A commercial site plan would also then be required. So something to point out about the location, property straddles between West State Road 46 and then also West Arlington Road. And it is part of the rural community zoning overlay of Ellettsville over here. This is the current zoning map. So here we have in the center the 2 parcels. You can see that right-of-way was taken when Arlington Road was improved, and also when West State Road 46 was also redesigned to go through this area. And we do have a really good stoplight through this area here. There is general business already in this area, as you can see in the red. We also have some limited business up in the top. And then the North Park PUD is directly to the south here. And should this ever develop, could provide maybe some access to the southern part of this lot. And then I will point out the residential neighborhood to the north here. And while we're at it, this is an interesting piece that actually has an approved commercial site plan for a veterinary clinic. It was never developed. And in this process, something we learned was that fire code was going to be difficult to be met with a 2-story building because of water pressure in this area. The petitioner was able to get a capacity letter It does not mention anything about water pressure, but I have heard from, fire marshal that 2-story buildings are going to be hard to suppress any fires in this area, which was why the rural community zoning overlay was not really encouraged, because one of the design standards for utilizing that is a 2-story building that is, front facing on the lot. So here we have just a basic site map that you can see. There's a ravine that kind of comes through the middle of the property. They've dammed up sometime in the past, made a little pond. I want to point out that this is the Bloomington Hospital Children's Services here. Used to be known as Riley Hospital branch, where they treat children. And Lindemann and Associates, who would like to purchase this and develop, does a lot of psychological services for children as well. And they thought this would be a good placement in tandem to this area. And like I said, we've got some North Park that could develop down here in the future, and some other business, a couple of banks in this area as well. These are some site photos. So this is along Arlington Road. This is facing west towards that stoplight. We've already got sidewalks in place here, and this is facing west or east down Arlington Road. This is the home that is existing. I believe someone does reside in this house at the moment. There are several structures on the site that, as staff was, reviewing property report cards, doing the site visit, felt that it might be necessary for the Historic Preservation Board to review this. I'll discuss that a little bit later. But we do have, an old barn on the site. And I do believe that the Lindemann and Associates does have on their plan that they would like to preserve the barn on this site. Now, what preserve means, I'm not positive, but they do seem to want to keep this structure up. Here's a photo that's facing west, and you can see the old, the hospital facility here to the side. That dammed up little pond in the ravine. Got a little glimpse of that. Does hold a little bit of water, and there would be fire retention required, and a draft plan does not include touching that. It would just sort of be a preserved area. It's like, this is facing north. So the older house is over here, and then this other structure, which has like a door and a couple of interesting windows that Historic Preservation is going to maybe report on that in a bit. There is a really lovely, there's several lovely groves of trees. And there is one that's kind of on the wood line that might be a consideration as a condition to approve. They might interfere with a phase 2 building. So a design, workaround might need to be thought of if the Plan Commission decides to make this a condition of approval to kind of preserve some of these larger trees. These, I think, would be directly within the realm of the proposed development. Here we have some aerial photos. So facing north, again, you can see Arlington Road up here, and here's the corner of the property that was taken out for 46. A little bit closer in, you can see these structures. Here's the barn, and you can really kind of see a lot of the development in the area that has taken place. And then this is facing south, so it just gave a good view of all of the different structures on site. That one door that faces this way, the barn, and then I put a circle around this grove of trees here. Comprehensive plan has this as Makua mixed use. At first I thought it was a designated community, but I had to recolor this one to kind of discern that, but it is mixed use. And when I went through the comprehensive plan, there was a lot of matchup, a lot of support for this general business type zoning in this area. This is the petitioner's letter from Spring Point Architect that Don Gray submitted. And basically they're wanting to develop this and put 5,000 square foot office building for Lindemann and Associates Psychological Services. And they did have like a phase 2 for another 5,000 square feet, possibly in the future. These are the site plans. These are draft site plans. In fact, this is the second iteration that I've seen of these. And they very well could change depending on how driveways are approved or bioretention is approved in the future. So something to work around. We have not pre-designed a site plan like this yet. But, showing that, bioretention, preserving this barn possibly, and then like a phase 2 building here, which may interfere with that grove of trees. And then this again is just a up close look at what you can see that they're proposing. This just about a 5,000 square foot office facility. I think Lindemann and Associates is currently located in the city of Bloomington. It's kind of in a basement structure. I can see why they would want to kind of upgrade, relocate, and have a facility that's accessible. All right, so we have the AgRR use table is included in the packet. So currently, we see what is permitted here. And right now there is a single family dwelling. And then we have also the general business use table that is in the packet as well. So it does allow for a lot of items. And again, what they're really wanting to focus on is an office here. We did a comparison of design standards between the AgRR district and the general business zoning district. And so should this rezone go through, then these would be the design standards that would be required to be met. So a 6-foot side yard setback is probably one of the more pertinent ones that would be needed. Also 45-foot height, again, I think that water pressure would be an issue that we wouldn't even come close to something like that because commercial buildings often require those sprinkler systems. And then I did include the use determination in the packet. And I wanted to include the utility Eastern Richland Sewer Corporation provided a capacity letter for sewer, and then Ellettsville Utilities had the capacity letter for water availability. The MS4 coordinator reviewed this and didn't really have any direct comments at this time because we are not in a site plan phase, and just kind of made some notes to herself that, we didn't see any karst or sinkholes. A Rule 5 would be required if we're disturbing more than an acre. That's just general. She did note the farm pond that was on the property. So, and then the stormwater department, they do believe that like a commercial driveway permit could be issued for this site. That has not been submitted just yet because they don't know exactly where that's going to go. But they did also have that comment about stormwater here when designing the driveway. So you all saw this at the PC admin meeting on February 1st, and you asked that the plan review committee review this. And so it did go to plan review committee last Thursday, and I was unable to update the staff report for you all because publication kind of cross wires there. But 5 members did attend the plan review committee. There were 2 different motions made to support the petition, but failed to have a majority. So a consensus was made to just follow or forward some comments from the meeting. And, a lot of people were apprehensive to support a positive recommendation just because they didn't think they had enough information regarding the historic preservation aspect of this site. And so, they did think that the comprehensive plan supported that general business zone, but kind of just wanting to see what would become of the Historic Preservation Board's review and analysis. So the Historic Preservation Board of Review actually heard this January 24th on 2022. And reason being was when staff was reviewing this site, the property report cards have these structures on there that are listed as, red flag. This could be of some significance. And then, some of the structures on the site just looked interesting enough that it didn't hurt to ask. I will note that this property did not appear in the State Historic Archaeological Shard database from 2015, nor did it show up in the interim report 1989 inventory, but they often overlook barns. Yesterday, I received a report from Monroe County Historic Preservation Board of Review from the 2 members that did go out on the site. And this report is on the agenda and was distributed to those members today in the historic preservation packet for the February 21st meeting. I do believe they'll review it and decide if they want to comment or make a recommendation based upon what was found at the site. I'm not going to go over this. I almost anticipate that you will see this petition before you again, in which case then you will get this document within the packet and also then an analysis of what the Historic Preservation Board states on February 21st. And so the Hinkle rezone petition REZ-21-8, right now staff is recommending approval for the rezone based on the findings of fact and subject to the Monroe County Highway and MS4 coordinator reports, with the following recommendation: that the petitioner is to enter into a written agreement to preserve the large oak grove trees west of the large barn that I think you saw circled in one of those aerials. And then, we are kind of waiting to see what the Historic Preservation Board decides, if they want to make a recommendation or if they just, trust that, that site plan where they say they're going to preserve the barn is good enough and doesn't require any further, conditions to go forward. So with that, willing to take some questions.
Okay, Mr. Enright Randolph.
Just due to the fact that it seems like we're still waiting for some information, I guess this is more of a procedure question. If we take no action, it just automatically continues. And if we want to do something of that effect, then we don't necessarily need to turn it to the petitioner representative or the public, right? We could almost move to adjournment. Is that right? My understanding?
I'm going to let Jackie or Larry maybe speak on that part of it, as far as the technicality of if this could just deny the waiver, so you can hear it.
If we take no action, it automatically gets continued. And if we take no action, does that mean then we don't need to move to the petitioner representative or the public?
It's scheduled for a hearing, so.
Yeah.
It's the first hearing. It's the first hearing, so you need to go ahead and take testimony from the petitioner and any public members.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to recognize myself, Mr. Garitas. I'm sorry for jumping the line in front of you. But one thing I'd like to see in this petition, if it goes through, is again what I've been referring to as night sky compliant lighting. If that could be added into conditions, that's all. Mr. Garitas.
Okay, quick question. So the large grove oak trees that you're talking about, Tammy,
Yeah.
on the schematic plan that's presented, the existing building is the one that's shown just next to the detention basin. Is that where you're talking?
So this is the barn and it's just west of the barn, kind of like in this area here.
Okay. Has the petitioner, have you brought this up to the petitioner or the petitioner's representative?
They have seen this report several times and have yet to be able to speak at any of the meetings yet. This is their first opportunity to be able to have a voice.
Okay. And then how do we quantify the night sky lighting?
So our site plan review actually requires that all lighting is downward facing. So in a sense, our ordinance, when you're developing a new commercial site, you are required to essentially become dark sky compliant. And then we also make sure that light does not cross over any property line more than 1 candle foot. So we usually have someone submit a photometric site a separate sheet of a photometric analysis, just confirming that light is essentially staying on the site and that we confirm the design of all the lights and that they're downward facing. I've even denied flag poles that want to have the lights that shine up at the flag.
So
Gotta have downward facing.
Yeah, so the requirement for that is already inherent within the ordinance, is that correct?
I would say so. It doesn't specifically say dark sky, but the intent is downward facing lights. And I've gone back and forth with with engineers, developers to get the design right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions by members of the Plan Commission? Well, I'd like to turn it to the petitioner and the petitioner's representative. I know that Ms. Gray is here, and all combined, the petitioner has 15 minutes to address the Plan Commission.
Dawn, you might want to raise your hand just to see if we can't get you in or upgrade. I don't think I have the possibility to upgrade. Jackie, do you?
Hello, hi. I believe I'm been upgraded.
Yes. Hi, Dawn.
Hello, I'm Dawn Gray with Spring Point Architects, and we are representing our client, Lindemann and Associates, Psychological Services. I think that Tammy has done a good job presenting the project. We feel that this is a appropriate and good use of the site, and are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Mr. McKim?
Well, were any other petitioners' representatives going to speak? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun there. I just...
Are there other representatives from Lindemann and Associates who wish to speak? Or from Structure Point, or who wish to speak?
I don't see anyone.
Okay, so Mr. McKim?
Well, I guess the question of the Oak Grove came up, and the question was raised how the petitioner felt about that. So I guess I'd like to hear the petitioner's representative answer if that would create an impediment to achieving the goals of the project.
Yes, this is Dawn Gray again. It's a little hard to tell exactly where those trees are in relationship to what is being proposed as a second phase, but I think that a second phase building could still be achievable and respect those trees. But like I said, it's just a little difficult to see exactly where those are in relationship to the site plan as it's developed now.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. So are there further questions for Ms. Gray? If not, we'll move to members of the public. Oh, Mr. Enright Randolph, sorry.
Sorry, I couldn't get to the raised hand. I lost audio. I guess really quickly, the question was, does that tree patch pose practical difficulties? And the answer was, they're not certain quite yet. Did I?
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, well, let's move forward to members of the public. If there are members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition, you would have 3 minutes each. So raise your hand or press *9 on your telephone. I see Susie Hinkle has her hand raised. So if you could unmute yourself, we'd like to hear from you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Nice to meet you all. My name is Susie Hinkle, and my brother and I are the owners of the property. And I just thought I would lend my support for the rezone. My brother and I are in favor of it. A couple different reasons. One, my grandparents bought this property in 1953, and the intent was to pass it down to us for our inheritance. And so when we're looking at who would buy the property from us, we were really, really pleased to find that it was a doctor's office that works with kids, particularly over at Riley. We had an older sister that, excuse me, passed away at the age of 13, and she was a Riley kid. And so we just found it really fitting that these are the people that would would pass the torch to. So we're pleased that they're respectful of the property itself and it'd be next door to these kids, which I know how much they need their help. And I just think it's a really, really great fit, and couldn't be more happy about it. I'm going to attend next Monday's historical virtual meeting. I can shed some background on some of the buildings. My granny lived to be 102, and I was fortunate enough to take care of her and be with her a long time. So I know a lot about the property and such. The storage building to the east of the driveway, I think, had some of their intention and possibly even excitement that it maybe had been a one-room schoolhouse. And unfortunately, it's a storage building that my grandpa put there in the 50s. He liked to collect things. And when you collect a lot of things, you need storage buildings. So that's what that one is. But I just wanted to ring in and say that we're really pleased that these are the people interested in the property. And I'll be happy to talk with the Historical Society or Preservation Committee next Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hinkle. I just want to thank you for your patience and perseverance in attending tonight's meeting and waiting to this hour to be able to speak to us. So thank you for your insights and your comments. Are there other members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? If so, please raise your hand or press *9 on the telephone so that you can be recognized. I don't see anyone. So I'd like to move to members of the public who may be opposed to this petition. If so, please raise your hand or press *9 so that you could be recognized for 3 minutes. Okay, I don't see anyone. We'll come back to the Plan Commission, and if there's no motion, that's fine. But if there is a motion, we know that the Historic Preservation Committee is going to hear it on the 21st. And so I don't think that there would be a motion at this time unless somebody proves me wrong. Mr. Enright Randolph.
I'll take my chances here and just maybe, I don't know, there might be an update with Larry's last day here, so I won't call for adjournment, but that was going to be my motion, to take no action and move to adjourn.
Okay, we do have some administrative business at the end here that was mentioned at the very beginning. So if you don't mind sticking around a little bit longer, we'd be grateful. So this continues, and that's that. It's a little awkward. But that being said, Jackie, I'm going to turn it back to you and Larry and Mr. Schilling to handle this next part of our meeting.
Okay. Well, I just want to take a moment to thank Mr. Larry Wilson. This is his last Plan Commission meeting, which is quite a feat. Larry's worked with the Planning Department for over 10 and a half years. We've really greatly appreciated Larry's leadership. His expertise in land use law matches none, and he's just been greatly, greatly appreciated by the department. He's left us in really great shape. As he's mentioned at prior meetings, we have a new planner starting on March 2nd, a planner 2. So we're excited for that person to start, and it will be a transition right as Larry is leaving. But we're very excited to be moving forward and for Larry's expertise and guidance and putting us where we are at. So Really appreciate Larry. We will miss him deeply, and we do have a retirement party scheduled for Mr. Wilson. So we will be doing a hybrid meeting. Yes, so everyone is involved and everyone is welcome. So we will be meeting Friday, February 25th, noon to 5, and I'll be sending out the Zoom information for those of you that would like to join via Zoom. And in person, it will be at the Showers building. It will be across the hall in the break room, room 211. So I'll be sending some information to you via email on that, but just wanted to get that on your calendars. And then, because I've sent you a lot of doodles, I'll also send one last special meeting that we'll have scheduled for the CDO work session. But just want to have everyone, say something nice to Larry before he leaves. We'll greatly miss him and appreciate his tenure at the planning department. 10.5 years is really impressive. So.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I just really also want to add my thanks, and I look forward to seeing you in person at the event in the Showers building. And Mr. Wilson, thanks for all of your leadership and for your direction of the department. You've been wonderful. So yeah, very good. So did Mr. Schilling, did you have something that you wanted to add? Sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, I would just second Jackie's comments, of course, but and I have no report to give.
Okay.
I just want to note, speaking of hybrid meetings, it looks like the county will be going to hybrid meetings in March for all you. So there'll be some notices going out. We've advertised them to be hybrid meetings. We've already passed the resolution to allow hybrid meetings for our boards and the Plan Commission. So just want to give you a heads up, I won't be there. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
But you could be, Larry, if you really wanted to, you know.
You can come hang out with us anytime.
We are so going to miss you, Larry. Oh my gosh.
You may see me
everything.
remonstrate at some point.
And I see Mr. Garatas has his hand raised.
Larry. No, I just wanted to say I've worked with Larry in maybe a different capacity than a lot of people, because as a petitioner's representative and as a person on the Plan Commission or BZA, in disagreement or not, I always found Larry very gracious and professional in every single conversation that I've had with him. And again, that's in disagreement or otherwise. And at the end of the day, I can always appreciate his professionalism, his candor, and his presentation of his thoughts. And I just wanted to say I'm grateful for that. And it's been a pleasure, Larry. It really has.
Thanks, Bernie. And I want to thank everybody. Monroe County's probably the only place in the state of Indiana, I could say categorically, where I would be allowed to be a planning director, or would last more than like a couple of meetings. The commissioners have been incredibly supportive. The county council has been incredibly supportive and allowed us to really, professionalize the department, increase salaries, increase training opportunities, and all the Plan Commission members, since I've been here, have been remarkably interested in the future of Monroe County and fighting for what they feel should be saved, as well as trying to plan a future that will be better for all the residents of the county. So again, I want to thank everybody. I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing. I don't have a bucket list because my eyesight's not good. I'm kind of awkward and I'm afraid I might accidentally kick it. So I'm pretty open, but I probably will be seeing some of you around. So again, thanks for the kind words.
Thank you. And there are comments in the chat, from Amy Thompson and Dee Owens that they also are appreciating you and Trana and Wright Randolph and, everyone. It's unanimous that on this, we're unanimous. We appreciate you and we look forward to seeing you on the 25th. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
So if there's a motion to adjourn for this evening, I'll so move. And if anybody objects, please raise your hand.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Dee. Okay, good night, everybody, and thanks again for all of your service.
Everybody.
Bye.
Have a great evening.